Martin Luther comes about, and as we've discussed before, is very much involved in this privatization, or at least the beginning of the privatization of Christianity, having a personal relationship, personal choice, reading silently to yourself from the text. And he goes a step further, and he says all this mystical interpretation of the Bible and the Eucharist and all this other stuff is all hogwash. That it's very clear what the Bible says, it's very clear what the Bible means, and anybody that takes it into another realm is deluding you. This is basically the position of Martin Luther. Well, this, in combination with the other dynamics of the time, the maturing of the natural sciences, the dawning of the age of Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, and so forth. Science has to now rid itself of mystical elements which had been very much part of science until the dawning of the European Enlightenment and the maturing of rationality. And science had to be purified of irrational, abstract kinds of thinking and writing, so that the fact a plant looked like an organ in the body that was used to heal had no longer any merit for the science, for the new maturing of science. That science had to be more focused on highly empirical, rational lines. And so, parallel to the thinking that's going on in the Christian world, science actually, I believe, creates a new category of literature which we know today as fiction. There is nonfiction, which in this mode of natural science is the clear, rational, articulate, what's the word I want? Spasht in Hindi. Transparent prose. This is what science now requires, and for that which is mystical, abstract, even fanciful, mythological, even religious, will now fall under the categories of fiction literature, out of which comes the novel and everything else. Poetry, even. So mysticism now is banished from natural science. As time goes on, and William James will confirm this at the dawn of the 20th century, that that mysticism is something that is ineffable. One cannot articulate it, and it is something that is experiential. So mysticism gets placed in this very sort of odd exclusion. It's now pretty much being excluded from religion, except pretty much banished to the margins. And I'm talking about Western religion, and I'm talking mainly about Christianity here. It's banished from science. It is put on the level of that which is not rational. William James even removes it from the philosophical and lays it pretty much quite squarely within the private realm of the psychological. And it has remained pretty much in that situation ever since. So that when we think of mysticism as experiential, what we're thinking of the way that mysticism has been used in the past century. But previous to the past century, the use of mysticism, la mystique, has previously contained only a small portion of what we may consider to be the experiential. India, on the other hand, I would argue that Indian culture cannot really be described as mystical in the same sense that this word has been used in many different contexts since the time of the Greeks. And one of the reasons for this is the means of interpretation of Indian texts, which, as we have discussed, are very largely oral texts. Interpretations follow linguistic lines. This is one of the huge differences that we have between Indian culture, so described as religious culture, which I don't believe fits, and Western culture. Western religious culture even. The difference in the way that we approach interpretation. The great thinkers, called the great philosophers of India, such as Adi Shankara, Madhava, Ramanuja, and so forth, were really, ultimately, bottom line, linguists. And their interpretations of text were based on the considerations of speech and the commentaries that have accompanied various traditions. It's all speech-oriented. There is nothing to go into a trance about and imagine or even have darshan of God's ultimate plans for planet Earth. This really doesn't exist as such in traditional Indian culture. This is really one of the very, very large differences